Yes.
Can you all go to the gathering and let me know if it's, well, I can do that on my phone.
Okay.
Okay, why is this telling me restream? I need to do that. Okay. Can you go?
Yeah, we're live.
We are? We are?
Yeah, we're live. Yes, we're live.
Okay, okay. Hello, hello. Because for some reason when I share it, another picture comes up and I couldn't tell if we were live or not. But hey, everybody, everybody. We are so delighted that you are here, ready for us and this new book that we're going to explore this year. We're going to spend the whole year on a particular book, and we are thrilled about it. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay. Y'all let me know if you see the screen. Okay. Everybody see the screen? Okay. So this year we will have our Womanist Bible exploration featuring one of my favorite books. It is called What Matters Most, 10 Lessons in Living Passionately from the Song of Solomon by none other than Hebrew Bible scholar, preacher par excellence, Reverend Dr. Renita J. Weems. And as everything she does, she did her good work in this particular book. I've had this book probably, I would I would say somewhere around maybe 15 or 16 years when I was working in the nonprofit sector with survivors of sex trafficking, um, women who had been prostituted. I taught a Bible study for that group every Wednesday night, and then we increased it to Thursday, so Wednesdays and Thursdays. And I gave all of the women in our program this book, and because it meant so much to me, it helped me so much. It really helped me to see myself in a much more capable and empowered light as a Black woman with agency, who had a right to choose the kind of life she wanted and deserved. Um, what matters most, 10 lessons in living passionately from the Song of Solomon is the real deal from Dr. Anita J. Weems. And so we're happy to enter into conversation about this wonderful book. Let me pull up the chat so that I can see anybody has any comments as we go along. Yes, we are live. Thank you. Let me put a picture of the book here so everybody can see what it looks like. Here it is. And so if you don't have it yet and you want to engage with us, if you want to be a part of this study, please do yourself a favor and pick up the book. Pick it up. I'm telling you, you will not regret it. I'm going to go ahead and share this to my personal page. So give me a minute to do that. Okay, let me share this. Copy. Give me just a second. Okay. Okay. All right, so we have Bianca Richardson and Cindy Canty Dumas. Am I saying Dumas right, or is it Dumas? Dumas, okay. They are in the Zoom room with us. I am expecting at least one more person in the Zoom room. Hopefully she'll make it. But if not, if you have questions, I may not be able to see all the questions. I'm gonna do my best. I have my phone on the gathering page, and I probably need to. Let me go ahead and close this screen out so that I can go here. I'm gonna leave the meet. Okay, I'm gonna leave the meeting, and I'm gonna go to my Facebook page also in case there are comments or questions there. All right, so I can see what's happening. All right, well, let's get going. I want to start this way. First of all, Bianca and Cindy, how y'all doing? How you feeling about this study? Or this exploration? Because that's what we're doing. We're going to explore.
I'm feeling really good about the introduction and all that it offered, and all that how the introduction framed what we're going to be getting into and learning.
Yes. And here is my big announcement. My big announcement is that for our February Womanist Bible Exploration, guess who we gonna have join us? Guess. Okay. We're gonna have the one and only Reverend Dr. Renita J. Weems. She will join us for our February study exploration, and I tell you, I am tickled about it. I'm so excited. Who else? Who better than the author to join us for our February Black History Month, right? Black History Month Womanist Bible Exploration. So we are going to, tonight though, we're going to look at, I'm just going to do some reading to get us started. I want to read, I'm not going to read all of the Song of Solomon. I'm just going to read maybe the first few verses of chapter 1. And then we will have some conversation about some of the things that we have seen or I see in the introduction. And then we'll call it a night. So I'm going to start just reading a little bit from chapter 1. The Song of Songs, which is Solomon's. Now, I'm reading from the book, from Dr. Weems' book, and she uses, for the text, she actually uses the King James Version. So that's the version that I'm going to be reading from, because I'm reading from the text from her book, the way she has it in here. So the Song of Songs, which is Solomon's. Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for thy love is better than wine. How many of y'all have heard preachers use that line during marriage ceremonies or anything? I had a pastor, and he had the most sensual wedding ceremonies, Dr. Kenneth R. Green, and he would often cite this particular passage, this particular verse, actually, in his wedding marriage ceremonies. Right when it was time, for the couple to kiss. Let me say that again, because let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for thy love is better than wine. Because of the savor of thy good ointments, thy name is an ointment poured forth. Therefore, do the virgins love thee. Draw me, we will run after thee. The king hath brought me into his chambers. We will be glad and rejoice in thee. We will remember thy love more than wine. The upright love thee. I am black, but comely. O ye daughters of Jerusalem, as the tents of Kedar, as the curtains of Solomon. Look not upon me because I am black, because the sun hath looked upon me. My mother's children were angry with me. They made me the keeper of the vineyards, but mine own vineyard have I not kept. Tell me, O thou whom my soul loveth, where thou feedest, where thou makest thy flock to rest at noon. For why should I be as that one that turneth aside by the flocks of thy companions? If thou know not, O thou fairest among women, go thy way forth by the footsteps of the flock, and feed thy kids beside the shepherd tents. So I'm just going to stop there. Any observations just from those few words, just from those few lines? Any thoughts that come to your mind as we look at this particular text?
I think the first one for me is verse 6 when it says, "Look not upon me because I am black." I think that struck out for me. I was curious, there are different thoughts about that I had on whether or not um, it was a shameful thing, because later she also said, my mother's children were angry with me. And so that kind of, raised a flag for me on why she said, look not upon me because I'm black.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, good question. And of course, in verse 5, that's the famous line, I am black but comely. Other translations say, I am black and, not but, I am black and beautiful. Some translations say that. And it's, to me, it's if she is claiming her own beauty, claiming her right to be different, because I feel like from looking at verse 6, as you said, I see that there's something different about this woman. There's something different about her that might rub her siblings the wrong way. There is a difference between she and them. Maybe the difference, I think one difference is of a physical nature, of the way she might look. But certainly, as the more we go into this study, we'll see that there was also something different about her personality, right? About her characteristics, about the way she moved and navigated the world, right? That it was different, audacious, womanist, if you will, right? And just think about during the time that this was written, right? For a woman to be as self-possessed as she seems to be in these readings. So that's something interesting. Anything else? Cindy, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think also that she was very self-aware and
Uh-huh.
knew what she wanted and needed and wasn't afraid to express it.
Yes. Same. I picked that up too. Absolutely. Now, I don't know how you all grew up hearing anything about this woman here, but do you recall any sermons that you heard about her, and how was she positioned, if you did? How was she described in the text? I don't recall.
I don't know.
Yeah, I really don't. I mean, I knew this story existed. The only part that I really heard about was that verse 5, right? And that was used in such a way as to affirm Blackness, right? But I can't say that I ever, until this book, that I ever really heard any kind of treatment on her specifically that was affirming, or well, in any way, actually. And so that's one of the reasons this book was so refreshing to me, because it focused on her, it centered her in the narrative, right? It humanized her, and I was able to relate to her. And so one of the things I want to share, and this is a quote directly from the book, she said, Dr. Weems says, what matters most is a rendezvous with desire. that our heroine, she's calling this woman, this Shulamite woman, a heroine, that our heroine embarks upon as a way of inviting us as modern readers to contemplate all the journeys we've taken. A rendezvous with desire. Wow. What do we do with desire? What have we been taught and trained and theologized about desire, right? Because in this story, there is a desire, well, in this narrative, there is desire for connection. There is desire for sexual intimacy. There is desire for relationship. There is desire for autonomy. Those are just a few of the desires that I see. And as women, and for Black women in particular, I think it's important that we learn to be okay with desire of all kinds, right? That we not allow anyone to demonize us for having desire. And that's one of the things that happens in this reading, in this treatment of this text. And so she begins in the introduction. I mean, she kicks it off with like this fiery question, right? What if, she says, I am the one responsible for going after the life I've spent my whole life praying for? What if? What if it's me? What if it's my responsibility to do what I need to do as a woman, as a Black woman, to pursue what I really, really want? Howard Thurman asked this question, this fundamental question. What do you really want? Right? And so I think that's a powerful question. What do y'all think about that question?
Well, for me, it really struck me, I think, also when she reframed this question to also add, what if I'm the one I've been waiting for all these years, right? Like,
Yeah.
and for me, it really takes the onus off of looking for a savior, right? Or someone to
Yes.
come and sweep me off my feet and all of these kind of, um, ideals, right? It's really it was striking. It was a very good question. I did ponder on it, and in some ways, I think about how personally I have assumed this in certain things, and other things I haven't, right? Well, so it was one of those aspects of looking at desire and maybe even reframing that into my own responsibility completely, not just in certain areas.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to read some more of this. I want to read some more of this introduction. And as I'm reading, if anything jumps out at you that you want me to stop and for us to explore and talk more about, just go ahead and interrupt me. That's fine. So in the introduction, she starts with this question, right? Dr. Weems starts with this question. What if I am the one responsible for going after the life I've spent my whole life praying for? The question caught me off guard. The woman standing before me had chosen not to say very much in class over the past 7 weeks. And now it was taking me a moment to get accustomed to the sound of a voice coming from her body. So obviously, Dr. Weems is teaching a class. She's in a seminary classroom. And this is one of her students who asks this question, right? After spending years of waiting to be rescued, and this is a quote, after spending years of waiting to be rescued, waiting to find happiness, waiting to be loved and praying that someone or something outside of myself would see my predicament and answer my prayers. Are you saying that it's up to me? What if is the question every woman eventually has to ask herself. I replied, looking straight into the eyes of this 40-ish looking woman who'd kept her eyes down and glued to the pages of a worn Bible she'd kept open and atop her desk every week of class. It was difficult to know whether the pinched expression on her face this evening was because of her hairstyle or the discussion that had just taken place in class on the headstrong, passionate woman of Song of Solomon. We stood for a moment staring at each other. I feared saying more. I didn't want to risk bruising the candle wick trying to catch a fire inside her. Sometimes it's not the right answers that we need, but the right questions to catch hold and stir us. What if I am the one I've been waiting for all these years? We walked out of the classroom together, parted in the parking lot without another word spoken between us, and drove off in different directions. The woman with the pinched face didn't show up the next week for that last class, but then she didn't have to. She passed the class by coming up with the right question. And let me read this last little piece and then we'll share. You can learn a lot from a woman who follows her own instincts and desires. Examine her life closely, and you're apt to discover that one reason she follows her own compass is a lingering suspicion on her part that she alone is responsible for securing her future, for making herself happy. Now, I don't know about y'all, but it took me a long time to come to that realization that she's talking about right there. I mean, it took me a long time because I was socialized and theologized in Christian spaces and faith communities that I couldn't really find happiness until I got married to a man. That I was to die to myself in a relationship with a man, that I was to die to myself in relationship, that my fulfillment, that my flourishing was on the other side of marriage. And so it didn't matter how much professionally I achieved. It didn't matter how capable I was until I was married, not dating, married. Was I going to find happiness? And I believe that. I believe that. And I did have other dreams. I did have other visions for myself, but I squelched those. Now, I did go to college. I did achieve. I did have a great career, right, as a social worker. Cindy Canty Dumas, right? We're both social workers. I had a great career as a social worker in working for state agencies and working in the nonprofit sector. But there was something in me that felt like I was not complete until I married, right? And it took me 2 marriages and 2 divorces to come to realize that I alone was the one that could bring myself happiness and joy. Now, that doesn't mean that a relationship or being partnered, that there's not happiness and joy, right? It could be, but when you are looking for your own personal happiness and joy in another person, that I think is a recipe for disaster, and it's a recipe for unfulfillment. Right? And so what I hear Dr. Weems saying about in this introduction so far is that outside of ourselves, is not the answer for happiness and fulfillment. We've got to dig within. We've got to look within. And I know that has been true for myself. Yeah. Any thoughts?
Well,
Where are y'all on that?
it just makes me reflect. I actually, growing up, my grandmother and some of my aunts who had been married and widowed or divorced always told me, to love yourself and, these lessons. But I really didn't get it until I was in a relationship and I made that relationship my everything because I felt like, and I was, you know, I was taught, like you mentioned, die to yourself, that sort of
Yeah.
thing. So I
Yeah.
actually did that because I thought we were going to get married and I thought this was going to be, this person. And I am not sure exactly what happened in the midst of that relationship, but I realized that I had lost Bianca. And
Mm-hmm.
I came to that realization, and then at some point we didn't get married. He married someone else. That relationship was over, and I realized I had lost myself in this relationship. And I know that the process of finding Bianca again and
Yeah.
really truly understanding who I was caused me not to look for happiness in others. And so, like, I'm really happy being, alone or in a relationship or whatever.
Yes.
I found that, but it did take that experience,
Mm-hmm.
and a realization, and then the process of finding myself again to actually come to that realization for me.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And for me, I grew up in a very male dominated home. My father had no use for women. He had four daughters and a wife, and everything out of his mouth to his daughters was in service of a man. Get in here and
Mm.
learn how to cook. Don't no man want
Mm.
no woman that can't cook. Get in here and clean. Don't no man want a woman that can't keep a clean house. Everything was focused around the needs of a man. And
Yeah.
I just rejected all of it. Like, I didn't even learn how to cook because he wanted to learn how to cook. I had to learn how to cook when I had a child because even though he made us stand around my mother and learn, I refused to learn, but I just looked like I was learning, but nothing was going in. And although I rejected all of those teachings, I was still conditioned. Even when I
Yeah.
got out of the house, I still didn't know how to do anything that was in service of myself. So it took me
Yeah.
years of being in service to a man to learn that I didn't have love for myself. I had nothing for myself because nothing was ever cultivated for me. Nobody ever said self love, take care of yourself, all those good things that we know about today. So even though I was against it, it still caught a hold of me and it tracked me until I was able to see that this wasn't the way. And I was well up into my probably 30s when that happened.
Yeah. And of course, back then when we were growing up, we had no language around patriarchy, right? We didn't
No.
know what that, I mean, you know what I'm saying? We had maybe heard the patriarchs, right?
Yes.
And that would make us think about Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, all those fellows, right? But we had no idea of the ways in which we were being shaped and formed by patriarchy. And when you said, Cindy, that everything your father told you to do or guided you was about being in service to a man, right? And it was the same with me as well, and probably most women, right, who grew up in this world, right? And to resist that, we do it in different ways. I think that there is something in us innately that knows that ain't life-giving, and so we push back like you didn't even want to learn how to cook, right? in my marriages, I could not have a voice. I could, and I just could not have a voice. I could not be that. I could not be the definition of submission that we were taught, that I was taught. I couldn't do that, you know. And I didn't know why until I learned about patriarchy, until I learned about womanism, until I learned that it was really okay to center yourself, right? That it was really okay to say what you want and don't want to a man. Like, I could do that professionally, no problem. But in relationships, like Bianca said, I would lose myself. But although I would lose myself, there was something in me trying to hold on to myself. You know what I'm saying? There was something in me trying to hold on, like, you can't have it all now, right? But I didn't know what that was. And even, even the church women that I was learning from were teaching that idea of submission in that way, right? And so, yeah, it was just I wasn't good at it. But then it seems like neither is this woman in this text. So I want to read a little more, okay? So she says, Dr. Weems says, you might not expect to find in the Bible a tale about a woman who takes responsibility for her own happiness. But her commitment to life, love, and learning makes the unnamed woman in Song of Solomon a ripe example of what a woman bent upon forging a life for herself might look like. A woman bent on forging a life for herself. Now, that takes some determination. That takes some inner resolve. That takes some ways of thinking about oneself that is countercultural. That's what it took then. I believe that's what it takes now. And the world that we live in today still has a problem with that, which is why I think in many ways the world is going through and experiencing what we're going through, at least in America, right? Where Project 2025 is really trying to subdue and silence and take rights from women. Because a self-possessed woman, a woman who is bent on forging a life for herself, is a problem for patriarchy. And you women preachers are a real problem for patriarchy. And so what does it take? I want us to think about that. What does it take? What does a woman have to have on the inside in order to live a life where she's bent upon forging a life for herself? Weems tells us, she says she is headstrong, she is passionate, she is gutsy, and willing to risk disapproval of those around her in order to pursue her own happiness. Willing to risk disapproval. Some of us, and I'm using us in a general term of women specifically, particularly Black women, have been so beat down that we have become people pleasers. That the disapproval of others, we can't hardly take it because we want to be accepted and seen as acceptable. And we all do. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to be accepted, right? But when it doesn't happen, or when it keeps you, that desire to be accepted and acceptable prevents us from pursuing the life that we really want and the life that we're wired to have, doing the things we're wired to do. When we allow the approval and acceptance of others to get in the way of us pursuing that, we will be only shells of ourselves. And there's no fulfillment and no happiness in that. And all of us know women who live that way. And that's why, for me, sisterhood is so important. It's so important to have other women around and in close proximity, in friendship, right? Where women that can tell each other the truth and hold each other accountable and affirm our value back to us and our worth back to us. You know, that is so important, I think, for us. She says, the feisty, unnamed woman in Song of Solomon is every woman who prays to God for a soul-satisfying life, only to turn around and find God forcing her into situations where she must come to grips with her role in making her prayers a reality. So this woman isn't sitting around waiting on God to fix it. Shout out to my sermon this past week, right? She's not sitting around waiting on God to fix it. She realizes that she has a role in this, that she has a role in creating this life that she wants. When I was 58 years old, and I've shared this on many platforms and sermons, you know, all over, but this piece right here made me think about that, right? When I was 58 years old and my position that I'd had for many years was eliminated. Yes, I was depressed. I was sad. I didn't know what the heck I was going to do. And it came to a point where I asked myself, okay, what do you really want to do with the rest of your life? How do you want to live? It's like she says here, you know, every woman who prays to God for a soul satisfying life, only to turn around and find God forcing her into situations. Now, I'm not saying God forced that situation, right? But it happened. What I was forced to do was to come to grips with my role in making the life that I really wanted a reality. And so I had some decisions to make. And that's what I hear her saying here, that we have to make a decision or not. And, you know, not making a decision is a decision. Choosing to stay unhappy, choosing to stay in a situation where you're not fulfilled, choosing to not ruffle feathers with the decisions that we make that might be in opposition to what people in your family think you ought to be doing, right? That's not easy. It's not easy. But it's our responsibility. Yeah. It's my daughter. Yes, Indy, I'm on a, yeah. Yes, you can.
There's Ken here.
Okay. All right. Okay, I don't want to take up all the conversation. Where are y'all? Weems goes on. She says, it's a shame that we don't have a proper name for this woman Well, there's a proper name now. Their words that this kind of woman would be described as. But she says, it's a shame that we don't have the proper name for this woman who appears as one of the most stubbornly self-possessed women in scripture. Like so many women in the Bible, she steps onto its pages anonymous and nameless. Anyone, however, who leaves cautionary lessons from her own story behind for those coming after her deserves to be properly memorialized. But like lots of women in the Bible, a full biographical portrait of the woman behind the poetry in Song of Solomon is off limits to us. Twice in chapter 6, verse 13, she is referred to the Shulamite, which probably tells us more about the village in which she was born. A village, scholars speculate, was called Shulam than it does about the woman she was, right? So she's identified as a Shulamite because of where she lived, is what Weems is saying. In this regard, she was like Mary from the village of Magdala, right? Mary Magdalene. Although we know next to nothing about either woman's background or origin. It's almost like, these biblical writers, who I believe the majority were male, as far as we know. I believe that. But it's certain women that they don't want to tell you about. They want to tell you a little bits and pieces, but they don't want to give you the nuts and bolts, such that they don't even give you the name, because the name will also tell you something about a woman, right? When you look, I have a book that's named and unnamed women of the Bible, and in the deuterocanonical and apocryphal literature, right? And the unnamed women far exceed the number of named women. What's that about? What's that about? About not sharing names, not giving names. It is a way to visibilize. That's one of the reasons why I think people would get so upset during this last run for president with Kamala Harris, that people would get so upset when they would say her name wrong, and they would do it intentionally, right? Because intentionally misnaming somebody is disrespectful, is dishonoring. It's a way that you can make them invisible. And so we reject that. Okay.
Would you also say that not naming is a way to also assert some type of power as well?
Oh my goodness. Yes.
Right.
That's a great observation. Because if I've got the power to misname you, I call you what I want. In fact, I saw that on, I don't know if y'all ever watch Abby Phillip. Hi, Irma. Abby Phillip has a show, and it was a show that it was Roundtable, and they were talking about Kamala Harris. And this one lady, she was a white lady. She kept intentionally, they would correct her. She would still say it the way she wanted to. And finally, she said, "I'll call her what I want to call her."
Yeah.
What is that? But you're right. It is a form of exerting one's power and authority.
Bless you.
Over someone you see as lesser than you. Yeah. Absolutely. Irma, I don't know if we're studying this book, What Matters Most, 10 Lessons in Living Passionately from the Song of Solomon. I shared with the audience, because we're live as well. We're not just in the Zoom, we're live on Facebook and YouTube. And so I shared with the community that next month, Dr. Weems will be, she will be joining us. So we're really excited about that. We're making our way through the introduction right now. And we are having conversations about the Shulamite woman And Weems talks about that the idea of her name is not given because her name isn't Shulamite, but it probably speaks of where she was from. Shulam.
You know, Dr. Ari, I also would think with calling her by where she is from could also be a demeaning thing as well. When we think about certain villages that were poor or impoverished or the like, it could have been another way as well. Like even when I think about, um, you know, my upbringing and being from the lower Ninth Ward across the canal, I had family members who would not come and people who would not come to us. We had to leave our neighborhood and go to them. And it was because
Wow.
of crime and, you know, just the area. And so, you know, when I look at that as well, I kind of say, well, what was Shulam like? You know,
Mm-hmm.
why were they
Good point.
giving that type of detail, but not actually giving her name?
Yeah, that's a good point. Good point. All right, let's see what else she's saying. Okay, but in the 8 chapters and 117 verses that contain her life's dream, known as Song of Solomon, she rises from the pages as a force to be reckoned with. By whispering her secrets and sharing her fantasies as a woman, she upstages the men in the Bible who frequently get top billing. Her poems, To Her Unnamed Lover, have a way of sneaking into the bloodstream and making you think out loud about your own complicated, unexamined desires. Now, I'm going to be honest. The only way this text does that is when a woman who knows tells this story. Let me say what she said again. She says she upstages men. She said her poems, To Her Unnamed Lover, have a way of sneaking into the bloodstream and making you think out loud about your own complicated, unexamined desires. Only when a womanist is telling this story will we experience that, I believe. Because I've read this story before, but I've never personalized it until this book right here, right? I never saw this story and really got into it to see that this woman, first of all, who wasn't married, and that's the other thing that people try to do with this story. They try to make them husband and wife, but that's nowhere in this story. This woman had sexual desires. She pursued her lover who, you understand what I'm saying? She went after what she wanted. She was very explicit about her sexual desires and self-expression, right? And who's teaching that? Irma said, I wanted to preach on some of Song of Solomon on women naming desires and being desired for what and by who, etc. So I'm so excited. Oh, please do. This book will help you, Irma. Absolutely. But that's one of the reasons why womanist biblical interpretation is so important for our culture, for the church, for women, for Black women. Because for Weems to go in here and see what she sees as a Hebrew Bible scholar is amazing, it's powerful, it's revolutionary, it's empowering. At least it was for me, and I hope it was for all the women who I shared this book with. She goes on to say, by fantasizing openly, openly about intimacy with her shepherd lover. I just want to stop there. She says, by fantasizing openly about intimacy, there is no shame here. There is no shame here. It is what it is, people. How many women do you know who are blocked, who are silenced by shame of all kinds, but certainly of a sexual nature, right? Some of that shame is a result of sexual sexual intimacy. I wouldn't even call it intimacy, but it's imposed upon us because we were violated, I'll say. And we take on the shame that rightfully belongs to the predator, the molester, the rapist, right? Bianca says it also leans into willingness to risk disapproval. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. By fantasizing openly about intimacy with her shepherd lover and about stealing away for some erotic rendezvous with him, she forces us to confront head on our deepest convictions, our unspoken preconceptions, and our own complicated wishes. Being sexual is part of being human, her poem reminds us. Being sexual is part of being human. That right there. It's part of being human. It doesn't make you fast. Being sexual doesn't make you, and of course, here when I'm talking being sexual, I'm talking about healthy. I'm talking about not, violating anybody's rights or personhood, but sexual desires and wanting to fulfill sexual desires is a natural, normal part of being human. But we, as a culture, and certainly church culture, we have so much shame, we can't even say certain words. We can't even call body parts when we're talking to our children and teaching them. And as a social worker, one of the things I was trained to do that helps our children is to name them what they are. Right? It's to call a vagina, it's to call a penis, right? Because should, God forbid, something happen to our kids, they need the language. They need the right language. Right? Do y'all hear this cat in here? India, hold on, let me just let him out. You are getting on my nerves. Bye. I'm sorry. Yeah. So she says, this puzzle, let me see where we are. We got about 8 minutes. Is there anything y'all wanted to lift up in this introduction?
Well, Dr. Ari, you brought up some really good observations and discussion really about sexuality and discussing it and how we really can't talk about that. The question that I have is, how do we get to a place where Black women are comfortable? What do you, I mean, obviously conversations like this, but is there anything else that you think we can do to um, uh, not be bound, if you will, by the things that we have learned over time, were raised, you don't talk about that as, women, that sort of thing. What's your advice, if you will, if there's someone, maybe listening to this?
Yeah. Well, I think that's kind of layered, right?
Yeah.
It's layered on how to move beyond the sexual socialization that many of us have experienced. I think one part of that has to do with us interrogating what, if anything, happened to us to bring about that silencing and shame, right? Was it really just to interrogate that and unpack that? What happened? Did something happen? And was it just about a teaching, or was it a teaching and something physical happened to you that was a violation, right? And then addressing that if necessary. For me, as a sexual abuse survivor, right? So you had the sexual abuse, then you had silence about it, then you had shame about it. And so I had to work all of those things out in therapy. And that's a process.
Mhm.
All of that is connected, right? Our sexuality, it is like the center, the core of everything, right? The way we think about ourselves, the way we feel about ourselves, and the way we relate to other people. Our sexuality is tied into all of that. And so for me, a place to begin was, my therapy started because I read something. I read something that told me, that helped me to understand that what I was feeling and how I was moving in the world was directly related to the trauma, to the abuse that I experienced of a sexual nature. So read some things, read for understanding, right? Um, Ask people that you know and trust, what are some good books to help me understand different parts of myself from a sexual from a sexual perspective, right? But read some things. As you're interrogating, you may discover that what's happened, reach out, get some therapy. And that's easy to say, right? But therapy costs, good therapy costs. But many places have offer therapy on a sliding fee scale. That's how I was able to do it. Even I was working and I still needed a sliding scale, right? So those are two of the things, right? To interrogate and ask yourself the question, when did I first start feeling this way? Like trace it back. And then if necessary, get some therapy, read some things. And I think the way we talk to ourselves also is important. Do we talk negatively to ourselves? Do we speak kindly to ourselves? One of the characteristics of what I call a womanist ethical praxis is self-compassion. Develop the ability to have self-compassion, and find places and people and women who share similar experiences, and talk to and share how you think and how you feel, right? Kelly Brown Douglas has a good book called Sexuality in the Black Church, right? She's a womanist scholar, womanist theologian, and she's written, and there are even more, but I would encourage Black women, find something written by a womanist. Read more of Weems's books. Get this book. This is one of the reasons I gave this book to the women who I was working with, who were all sexually traumatized, who had all been socialized to be sexually repressive, even though they were dancing in strip clubs, right? Even though they were being prostituted. That was still, in many ways, for them, right? For them, because I know what they were experiencing internally, right? I don't want to get into this debate about strippers and women who do that, and they got a right. Yes, they do. But the women that I worked with, internally, they were hurting. They hated themselves, right? And so I got this book to help to empower them, right? And, be kind to yourself. Be kind to yourself. Yeah. So those are just a few things that I could think of. And those are things that I did, right? So I know what I had to experience in order to get healthier. Yeah. Okay, well, we've got 1 minute, and I'll just share this. She says the Shulamite story is one we know by heart as women. She falls in love and invests all her hopes, dreams, and passions in a relationship that never pans out to be what she imagined. It's a romance, quite frankly, that eludes both her and her readers from beginning to end. Her affair with the skittish shepherd lover can never be pinned down exactly. From the book's opening to close, her beloved refuses to stay put, refuses to reveal himself, refuses to step out from behind the bushes to be seen. It's the story of the forever absent lover, the furtive lover, the secret love affair, the doomed date, the exasperating courtship. The shepherd is the sweetheart you cling to, but never quite possesses. Woo! I've been there. All right. Well, thank you for tonight. We look forward to seeing you next month, the last Wednesday of the month, when our guest conversation partner will be Reverend Dr. Juanita Weems, taking us into chapter 1. Oh, there is one more piece I want to read. Here we go, and we're going to end with this. Oh, it's in the introduction on page 9. She says, Dr. Weems says, we have to decide what and how much we are willing to risk to create for ourselves the lives we dream and pray about. We have to decide whether we're going to stay true to ourselves and come up with ways to do just that, or we're going to give away bits and pieces of ourselves for the sake of peace, convention, relationships, and reputation. There are those critical life moments when how we choose is tied up with who we will become. Amen and ashe. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next time.